Lisa Anderson, host of Supply Chain Chats and president of LMA Consulting Group. And I'm thrilled to be here today with John Tulac, international business attorney and global expert. What else could we ask for in today's world, focused in on what's going on in the Middle East and the war in Iran and energy markets and all sorts of other interrelated hot topics and risks. John, welcome, and why don't you kick us off and tell us tell us wherever you'd like to start.
Oh boy, right. Well, thank you for having me back on your podcast, Lisa. It's always a pleasure to be with you. And, folks listening in, Lisa and I talk regularly about things that are going on in the world and how supply chain issues and geopolitical risks all tie together and impact what we do in advising our clients. And right now we are actually living the embodiment of the Chinese curse, may you live in interesting times. Let's face it, the world that we're accustomed to is run on energy. Despite what you may think when you're here in California, especially, and you're filling up the gas tank and you're looking at now over $6 a gallon and over $7 a gallon in some parts of the state, you say, this is really expensive. Yeah, and we're $1.67 more expensive per gallon than anywhere else in the country because of what we do here to ourselves in California. It has nothing to do with anything else around the world. But the fact of the matter is that even with this current spike in prices, we have relatively good pricing. If you look and adjust for inflation and you look backward, this current spike is nothing compared to what happened in the 70s. That was a real oil shock. And we actually had real shortages of gasoline, which is why you queued up on even in odd days and the line was out the door. And when a gas station had its quota met for the day, it stopped filling tanks. We're nowhere near to anything like that right now.
Hard to imagine these days, right? Hard to imagine. Actually, though, I think that's a really good place to start, John, because, the U.S. is focused on becoming energy independent, and that gives us it allows us to mitigate a lot of risks and gives us much more flexibility for these types of situations. Is that correct?
That's correct. And let's be clear that true energy independence is not achievable at the moment. Why not? The reason is simple. The refineries that we have here in the United States still have to import crude oil because they're designed for a certain kind of crude oil that we don't produce here. So yes, we can arrange swaps, but we're still dependent on somebody else then agreeing to a swap or still supplying us. And that's what's going to keep making refined products. Now, we have plenty of gas, and we can deliver gas. And a lot of our country operations are still based on gas. But here in California, we're trying to eliminate gas stoves and all be electrical. And we're trying to shut down, gas-fired power plants, which means then we are vulnerable to shortages because renewables, whether it's solar or wind, we have insufficient battery power to keep going in the event of a significant loss of ability to keep recharging. So you have to have those other plants available to keep supplying power. If we want to be truly energy independent, we have to be robust, we have to be resilient, and we have to build more infrastructure capacity to achieve that. And we also would need to build different kinds of units in our existing refineries, as opposed to shutting down refineries like we're doing in California, to be able to do this.
Well, actually, John, let me back up a second here just to make sure that we're bringing everybody along with us. Tell me if I'm getting this right. I think overall, at a high level for the U.S., we've increased our output of energy significantly. And energy could be oil, liquefied natural gas, and then, there's other forms of energy, obviously solar, et cetera. But basically, the idea is you have to produce it. To your point about gas in terms of filling your car, you have to refine it and you have to be able to transport it. So you can transport it on some of these pipelines. You can transport it on the ocean if you're bringing it from somewhere that you could, that's coming that direction. or you could put it in a truck, but like these things aren't necessarily comparable. Like you can't have so many trucks on the road to instead of a pipeline for some place that's going to be utilizing a lot of gas. But nevertheless, overall for the US, it's never 100%, but we're largely energy independent, meaning like we don't have to rely upon other countries, like for example, through the Strait of Hormuz to get it. However, like you said, it's all a regional picture and a local picture. And in California, of course, we are an exception because we have stringent and we have different requirements requiring different specs for our oil, fuel standards. There's environmental rules, etc., which requires certain type of oil and certain type of refineries to do it. And like you said, we're shutting down. Well, we've been shutting down oil production and refineries, so we're bringing in oil from other places for California. But at a high level is what I've said so far. Is that in the right ballpark? I just want to back up for folks who aren't intimately familiar.
Well, that's true. And if you were to Google it up, I'm sure you could get a pretty decent, if not entirely accurate for security purposes, map of the pipelines in the United States. And as soon as you see how many pipelines we actually have, you would understand that opposition to pipelines is really stupid because we already have so many, and we've also gotten really good at making them very, very well and very, very safe. In fact, you have far less risk of a pipeline incident causing serious harm as opposed to rail cars going off the rails and releasing crude oil or refined products or LPG and so on. And trucks on the road, again, when you see a tanker go up, it's a big thing.
Not a good thing.
So we should be in favor of improving our infrastructure that way. Energy isn't just dependent on our ability to generate electricity or steam and so on. We also have to have the other components that make the use of energy productive for what we need for our way of life. And so, for one thing, we need fertilizer with nitrogen in it. And, well over half of that comes from the Mideast, and it's all sitting right now. And so it's one thing to say, well, we can make it here. Well, we don't. We don't have ammonia plants because the NIMBYs have been opposed to that for a long time. And so we do import nitrogen-based fertilizers. And this is the time when farmers have bought it or are buying it because they're getting ready to plant and grow. So yes, a plant can pull nitrogen out of the air. That's what they do. But if you I'm sorry, I'm being sarcastic. But to really goose your production, you feed it more nitrogen. It's like Miracle-Gro. Hey, wake up, really grow. So we need that. We also need helium, which is in short supply, and much of our helium comes from the Mideast. Also, it comes from Ukraine. That's been disrupted as well. And we need that in chip production. So long term, the longer this goes, the more it hurts our economy.
Oh, for sure, for sure. And just to put that in perspective, the helium and the fertilizer are very tied in to oil, natural gas, and that's why all of it's related. And even though we've been focused in a general sense in the U.S. to become more energy independent, it does not mean we've focused on fertilizer. So we still have, supply chains are only as strong as the weakest link in your supply chain. So we need to, John and I have been talking about this for years, but we have to be looking at what are the critical items, where are they coming from, what are the key risks out there, and what are we gonna, what choke points do they have to go through, like the Strait of Hormuz, which is the one that's largely closed down now due to the war in the Middle East, and what you're going to do about it. So that's how it relates back to the helium and to the fertilizer. And like John was saying, the production of ships is critical. I've done other supply chain chats and bites related to that topic because if you if you can't build ships that would, like take your, transport oil, to transport goods, to defend a country, you are in deep trouble. So we've got to start building our capabilities, and part of that is to have the materials and inputs needed, which include nitrogen. That's what you're in essence saying.
Exactly. And we have to remember we share the planet with a lot of other people who also need to eat. So if we end up with a fertilizer crisis in, let's say, Brazil, because they use a lot of urea. So urea is the cheapest fertilizer. It's also the one that causes the most economic harm. But that's ammonia-based. It's strong nitrogen. It really gooses the plants. But long term, there are damaging effects, including runoff, and after a while, it burns out the crops. So the crops can't sustain on urea. But that's what most of the rest of the world relies on. We have better products here. But if fertilizer is in short supply and people start starving, you have to look at the stocks of food. And we have always been generous about feeding the rest of the world. Even in the worst days of dealing with the Cold War in the Soviet Union, we never denied them food shipments. And I would hope we never would to anybody in need. So we do have to think globally about this from a supply chain standpoint, because again, we do depend on our neighbors and friends in another country for the importation of a lot of other things. If they can't produce it because of what they're not able to do, then eventually it affects what we're able to do here. We are so interconnected, and of course, so in so many ways still with China.
Well, and energy is the core component, really, because it fuels manufacturing. It is obviously is needed in transportation. It's pretty much needed in the entire end-to-end supply chain. So there isn't currently a shortage of oil and natural gas. But the problem is that the Strait of Hormuz has 20% of the oil and 20% of natural gas happen to flow through the Strait of Hormuz, mostly to supply Asia and Europe to a lesser degree, and definitely to a lesser degree the U.S., which is really pretty much supplying California, or at least part of it is. And nevertheless, it goes into energy, goes into everything, including data centers. And there's definitely a race for artificial intelligence going on, and the building of data centers, which also requires energy. So energy makes, the world go round, and this is what is currently happening. With that said, though, I think that's part of the reason this whole thing started, John, because if this risk was going to exist and Iran had a nuclear weapon and they could shut down the Strait of Hormuz, to some degree, there's no good time to shutting down the Strait of Hormuz, but that's a very bad situation. So we have ourselves in a conundrum here.
Well, this is the thing. You have to, whether you like President Trump or hate his guts or whatever, you have to respect this decision to have acted, because Iran has been a thorn in the side of the world, but particularly the United States, since the fall of the Shah. And it's a regime that not only oppresses its own people, but it exports terrorism. And allowing a regime like that to have a nuclear weapon, or to continue to develop its ballistic missile capability, even with delivery of conventional warheads, poses a threat to all of its neighbors. And if they get long-range ballistic capacity, eventually the United States. This is a cancer, and it was a cancer that needed to be excised. And the longer you let it go, the more the cancer is more difficult to excise, to extract, with the possibility that you don't succeed. So does this meet the criteria of a just war? In the traditional sense where this was initiated, you could argue that it's not. But if you look at it more thoroughly, as theologians over the ages have grappled with, you're looking at the lesser of two evils. This is to prevent a whole lot of worse things from happening. And unfortunately, war has casualties and consequences. And there's a price to peace, as I like to say, and there are carrying costs to maintain the peace, or you don't have it for very long. So long term, this makes sense. And in short term, it means there's going to be some pain, because war always causes harm and loss and pain and tragedy for families and so on. So we can do better than we have been doing as a country since the fall of the Soviet Union. We thought, okay, nobody can touch us anymore, and we let some things go. Our infrastructure, in many ways, is decayed. Our energy grid in California, it could fail catastrophically at any moment. We haven't paid attention to that. We haven't built ships. We haven't maintained a proper navy, because we don't need to do that anymore. So there's been a real strategic thinking failure on a number of levels here in this country. And you can't turn that around overnight. And you can't build 1,000 planes a month like we did in World War II, because the technology and the time and effort it takes to build modern weapons is far longer. And we can't reverse the shipbuilding overnight either. But we can repeal the Jones Act and allow merchant marine flagged in other countries to deliver goods domestically up and down our coastlines. So there are some things that we can do immediately, and there's some things that we should start getting going right now if we want to protect the integrity of our security in this country. So this presents opportunity for a lot of companies, and it comes back to the management of supply chains, and building in the resilience. And I want to make one more point, Lisa, that goes along with energy in that regard. There's one thing that's even more vital to the survival of human beings than energy. Energy is about our way of life, but without water, we die.
It's true.
And so we have plenty of fresh water on this planet, so that everybody has fresh water. What we don't have is enough fresh water in certain places to give the water that's necessary to the people who live there. And so that's why you see Tehran running out of water. That's why you have seen a crisis in Cape Town. And it's why Phoenix could catastrophically fail in short order, though that's an easier problem to fix on a temporary basis because of proximity. Why is this a supply chain problem? Because water is bulky and heavy and therefore expensive to move, but we have the capability to move water. We have the capability as well to move energy and virtually anything else that we need, provided we source it well and we maintain the integrity and the resiliency with a plan B of our supply chains.
Well, and I'm glad you brought that up, because natural resources really are they propel supply chains, right? Because you have water, which also is needed in many manufacturing applications, in addition to just needing water for drinking, needing water for a lot of, with the Hoover Dam, there's a whole bunch of uses for water. With that said, water, energy, and then the other thing is rare earths that we've been talking about recently. Rare earths, just so everybody understands, is they're required for absolutely almost everything that's vital. So like electronics, anything that has anything to do with electronics, which is pretty much everything. So like a medical device, defense, artificial intelligence, I can go on, but it's required for so many things. And overall, we've done a good job of bringing energy, up in this in our country. We have more to go, as John was saying, but overall, we're doing a good job. Rare earths we're falling way behind because China is dominating. Now we're starting to do mining again. Again, you can't do mining, you can't do shipbuilding with a snap of your fingers. But we're starting in that direction. But that's the other thing, since we're talking about critical necessities to way of life, as far as and including manufacturing. I would just throw rare earths out there. What do you think, John?
Well, absolutely. And two things about that. First, rare earths aren't that rare.
That's true.
There are a lot of places, including here in the United States. We just haven't had the political will to mine them because we are so opposed to mining of anything, and
Right.
particularly in California. But we need to have rare earth origination capacity. But it takes years, even if you to permit it to say start today, it takes years to build a rare
Yeah.
earth plant. And we don't have the expertise in the same way for efficiency purposes as the Chinese do. And so, hey, would you like to transfer some technology back to us instead of, in exchange for all the stuff you've stolen from us all the years? I'd like to hear that negotiation be a fly on the wall.
No, I mean you're absolutely right. I mean that is I mean it's got to be an urgent priority, and I know that there is a lot of effort going into it in terms of, like you said, permitting. There are companies starting up, there are companies expanding related to it, but it's just like I said about the ships. That's easy to understand. Rare earths are in the same situation. We used to produce we used to be strong producers of ships. Now we went from producing, I can't remember how many, but to like one, two, like something like that per year, which is ridiculous. So if you double your capacity, which sounds like a really good thing, it's not so good. If you go
It's
from
not
one
enough.
ship to two ships, it's not helpful. We have to go from one to 100 or 1,000. So that's where scale comes into play here. And then to build ships, you go back to your rare earths, your water, your electricity. So that's why these are like they're so important, even though it's rarely talked about.
Exactly. And from a planning standpoint, I don't care what company you are and what you may be making or you're buying for adding value or reselling or what have you, you should look at what the component parts are that goes into every single part of what you do, because what happens if something is missing? So let me just give an easy example with the Internet of Things. We have decided foolishly for some of the stuff, as far as I'm concerned, to make all of our devices smart. Do we really need a smart refrigerator? I don't think so. Do we
I don't.
really need a smart washing machine? It might have some nice features, but do we need it? No. And the reason I'm mentioning this is that if we end up with a critical shortage of
Mhm.
some of these things because we can't make this chip or that other thing, then we need to let go of the things that are less important to us in favor of that stuff going to what we really, truly must have. And so
Yep.
again, you got to look at this and say, what can I let go and what should I prioritize in the event that we have to deal with scarcity on some of these things, and we end up allocating, you can have it for this, but not for that kind of thing. Because
Right.
in the short run, especially if this were to become a protracted conflict, we might have to do something like that. So,
Well, and it brings up a good point because it also goes back to a topic we've talked about many times, and that is China and being reliant upon China. Like it may seem like a good idea when you're doing it because you have low costs, it arrives timely, your customers are happy, and you make good money. However, in the last year, with the tariffs that went into effect, China did shut off the world supply of rare earths for a period of time. And so you know that if that happens, like it could happen again, same thing, is that if Iran, well, actually, Iran and China somewhat work together, but in essence, Iran is shutting down the Strait of Hormuz, like you can't get access to energy or some of those other critical pieces that John was talking about. It's a problem. So you have to think about you have to think about a lot more today in supply chain than you used to, is I think part of what I'm getting across. But what do you think, John?
yeah, exactly right. And yes, I would love to see us be able to move from this treating China as an adversary, which in many ways they are. They're certainly not friendly like an ally would be. But I would use the term cooperation. Whether we
Yes.
love each other or not is not the point. We don't even need to like each other very much, but we do need to respect each other and the capabilities for both good and for harm in terms of how the two countries behave. So we actually maximize value to both countries by cooperating on the things that each country respectively needs that the other can deliver. And so one of the reasons why I'm a little less concerned about China at the moment than other things is that, yes, we need the rare earths from China, but China needs oil from somewhere,
Exactly.
or they can't produce anything. And we have the ability, and China knows it, to stop their oil. Now,
Well,
let me deal
go
with
ahead.
this in historical context. We did that to the Japanese. One of the reasons why Japan engaged in expansion across the Pacific before Pearl Harbor was access to resources, especially oil, because their economy was building on energy and they didn't have the stuff on their own. So they had a militant regime and they went to war to go get it. We'll just take it from you because we can. And we did not recognize at the time
Right.
that was a trade opportunity.
Yep.
Maybe, and I've yet to find a historian that's really addressed this. It's probably out there somewhere. I just haven't found it. But honestly, the Japanese felt that they needed to strike and knock out our navy, and they thought that the most important thing were the battleships. But Yamamoto understood the most important things were the aircraft carriers. And that's why he always viewed Pearl Harbor as a failure, because the aircraft carriers went out to sea. They were away, which actually is a turning point right at the beginning. So I don't want to get too far into the weeds on that, but the point of it is we should learn our lesson that you take a powerful party and you inadvertently or deliberately, which is worse, deprive them of something you absolutely need. What are you going to get? You're going to get obvious pushback. And so that's where you come to the table and say, let's make a deal. This is where supposedly President Trump is going to shine, because he's purely transactional. And it may be a one-trick pony in terms of, how he pounds the table, and he's not as colorful as Nikita Khrushchev banging his shoe on the table, but it's the same idea. Pay attention to me. We should be doing that, and maybe some of this is going on behind the scenes in a better way than we're getting reported, and that's okay, because sometimes you don't announce something like that until you actually lock it down.
Well, and that's what I'm thinking, John, because I think you bring up a really good point. I mean, and that's where the whole picture starts to become clearer, because we've been building in the US energy independence. We'll just go with that, or increasing our energy production. Venezuela has the largest oil reserves in the world. However, they're not, utilizing them like we are here. So there's a lot to be said as far as what would have to go into making them produce oil. But nevertheless, Venezuela has been coming up in the conversations lately. And then to your point about the Strait of Hormuz, China gets 20% of their, or no, more than that actually, but they get a significant portion of their oil through the Strait of Hormuz. And they used to get the oil that comes from Venezuela as well. And so, to your point, China is going to need to replace their oil that they have, but they have a lot of rare earths. So it does provide a great opportunity to for the like, what are you calling it, cooperation or something? But basically, they clearly have the rare earths, and we have the oil, if you will. It's not 100% this way, but nevertheless, if we can work something out together, that's to your point, I think where we'll end up heading if we have a forecast here.
Exactly. And I want to bring up two more things that one is policy directed, but again, it comes to how we sustain our way of life and do it in an environmentally friendly way. And the other is an action suggestion for everybody who's out there who's got a business. So the first one, this is good news. We have the ability, because sooner or later, solar will deliver most of our energy. It'll be virtually cost-free, because the technologies are moving so fast in that direction. But in the meantime, may be 10, 20 years, we have new designs for smaller, far more efficient, far safer nuclear plants. Mm-hmm. And Europe has lived with nuclear power for decades. China is building them like crazy, has committed to this, along with solar. And we need to get over 3 Mile
We need to
Island
be there.
and the China syndrome and all this nonsense because it's bunk. And we need to be building nuclear power because it will bring down the cost and it will also be reliable. So you don't want fossil fuels, then use nuclear. It's clean, it's safe, and it's reliable.
I
So
completely
I'm
agree, and I
strongly
think
urging this.
I completely agree. And I think there are some initiatives out there to expand nuclear. It's just to John's point, I think they have to be accelerated and increased. Because we need it. I mean, you need energy because just even the data centers alone for artificial intelligence, which we really do need to be strong in that field, requires significantly more energy than pre-artificial intelligence.
Right. And the data centers are leading the charge for the really small nuclear generators, power plants. So they say, look, it'll take us 3, 5 years to get connected to the grid in certain parts of the country, but we need to be where the land is cheap, there's abundant water, and we need the power. And so we're willing to build the power and get this done faster, which is a smart thing to do. But if you agree that we need to have a reliable source of energy in this country, then I have 2 parts of this action plan. One is write to your politicos, your assemblyman, your senator, your congressman or congresswoman, your state senator, write to the Department of Transportation, write to the Department of Energy, write to everybody and tell them how negatively you're impacted by how we're currently doing certain things, the ones that most directly impact you, and be specific about it and say, we're not going to take this anymore. We're mad as hell, we're not going to take it anymore, the movie from the 70s. But if we don't start voting in a way that says, if you're not going to do it, we'll elect somebody who will do something in the right way. We have to take that power back. Power, that's power and energy go together. The other thing is, that's not just true for energy. It's true for anything that's going on where policy making and the implementation of that through new laws or the repealing of old laws that we don't need anymore or working well or too burdensome or whatever, that are impeding our ability to take care of strategic interests of importance to this country. We need to be making our voices known. We're not going to take business as usual anymore. And here's how we're being negatively affected. Here's my concern for our kids, which could get into a whole thing about how well are our kids being educated in certain places. But if we don't do that, then we deserve the government we get. And that's not what this country stands for. We have values, and those are the best values in the world. And sometimes we abuse our power, unfortunately. And every country has done that in their history. But we can transcend that. We can be better than that. And it goes, it's going to sound, okay, I'm waving the flag on the one hand, but I'm going to come back to what's in it for me. From a business person perspective, look at how much better your business would be if we did some things better than we're currently doing them. How much better would your business be if we got along with our friends and made friends with our enemies around the world and kind of changed our approach to some things? What would life be like that way? And it's not being Pollyanna-ish to think, somebody has to be the engine for that. And it starts with each other in our own backyard. You work on the things that you can make a difference on, and you write to someone else who could make a difference about the things that are outside of your control, but you can help influence the direction by taking a stand on things. And we've kind of lost track of that. You can't just leave it to the lobbyists. That we call special interests. Well, some of those special interests work for small business, but a lot of them don't.
Most of them don't, probably. Yeah. Well, and I would just add to what John's saying that refer to our blog and other places and some of the other podcasts that John does. But there are we're actually in the U.S. We've taken great pains to be environmentally friendly in our production of energy, like nuclear, like John said, it's so much, it's so much safer than it used to be. Our pipelines, like especially the pipeline in California, is like has so much less risk than even the one in Alaska. So like there's a lot of our production of liquefied natural gas is so much more environmentally friendly than like getting it from China. If you think about it, just using them as an example, but getting products from elsewhere in the world and then transporting it, it adds up to be so much, like it's not just supporting the future, but it's also supporting, a cleaner, greener. If you look at the total picture, it's also energy efficient.
Exactly. We shouldn't just have a knee-jerk reaction to anything that's identified as green as being anti-business. That's not fair and it's not true. But we do have some policies that, in favor of environmental causes or issues are not very effective in achieving environmental results and yet are extremely detrimental, cost
That is true
ineffective
too.
to business. It's like, doesn't anybody else see this disconnect and say we can do better than this? But when you take one extreme position or the other, and all you do is shout, nothing will ever change. We have to
It's
change the
true.
narrative on some of this stuff, and that will help make a difference. I'm
Very
more
good.
I'm
Well,
more optimistic than pessimistic, Lisa, about a lot of this stuff because I think, again, we can deplore the way that some of this is happening, but we're as a country we're getting a real wake up call
we are.
on
I mean,
several fronts.
I don't know if I want to call anything good in quotes, because like obviously COVID's bad, wars are bad. But what I would tell you though, from a supply chain point of view, we were, I don't know. The only thing that comes to mind is we're sitting ducks. Like we weren't prepared for what could happen to us. And then with COVID, we became more resilient and more agile. And with some of these geopolitical risks that have been happening, I mean, pretty much all key choke points almost have experienced an issue, between the Panama Canal experiencing a drought and like went down 50% capacity. Iran proxies were shooting ships or attacking ships, I guess, in the Suez Canal, which is another key choke point. And now the Strait of Hormuz has, largely closed down because of this war in Iran. And then there was a ship stuck in the Suez Canal and a ship that ran into, a key port in Baltimore. So there's all sorts of things that are going on. And we have to be able to think about, how all these pieces will relate to the supply chain. And if nothing else, just add the thinking into your mix. But I would agree with John that we're moving in the right direction. We're so much more resilient. If this had happened several years ago, we would not be in as good a shape as we are, because we've increased our energy production significantly. It's just so much more in place. So anyway, I agree with you, John. I think I have a positive outlook. I mean, obviously we all want the war to end and that type of thing.
And it will end. Hopefully it ends sooner rather than later, but it has to end on proper terms or it will be largely for naught. And that would be a crime.
Yes.
So we have to do it right. And then if you start something, you have to finish it and finish it well. And then you have to deal with managing the aftermath, the consequences. Because again, out of crisis comes opportunity, and then from even the worst case situation, you build on the opportunities. The Iranian people, by and large, love the West. They love Western culture. They watch Disney movies. They have access to the internet, and a lot of the favorites come from outside of Iran. But they have a government which is so repressive, and it's a minority of people that support that, and they deserve better. Any people deserves to be treated better than how the Iranian regime has treated their own people. So it'll be better for the people of Iran bringing peace to the Mideast. Everybody says that's impossible. It's not impossible. but it's not easy. It will take getting through this and then managing afterward to get it right. And look at the Marshall Plan. It took a long time to rebuild Europe after World War II, but Europe was rebuilt. It would not have been rebuilt as quickly and as effectively as it was if it wasn't for the United States and the Marshall Plan being willing to invest. Direct investment made a difference. But even into the 60s, if you look at swinging London in the 60s, and then you look beyond the pictures of the Life magazine with with Twiggy and the Beatles and the Stones and all that, you go a few blocks away, there was still rubble. There were still buildings that had been bombed out. It hadn't been taken down yet from the Second World War. That job didn't get completed until literally the end of the 60s.
Wow.
That's how much destruction there was. And Berlin was basically leveled, Hamburg basically leveled, all that rebuilt, but it took time. So
Yeah,
we
it
can do
will.
this, and then people will be put to work to do this.
Yeah, it's very true. I mean, if nothing else, it's going to require more, not less, supply chain expertise, more use of advanced technologies to be able to handle this type of complexity and, reroute and, all sorts of things. So, it's like going to be it's a fantastic future for those of us that are in the field of manufacturing, supply chain, global. We need high skilled talent. So, the future is bright from that point of view for sure.
Exactly. I mean, we can use AI to speed up a lot of the planning and development work and so on. But then we're going to need quite a few people who can pick up the shovels and the pickaxes and
For sure.
the heavy equipment and the other specialty equipment that will require skilled labor and get to work of actually doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely going to make a roaring comeback, if you will, so that we can be successful. Well, time is always flying by, John. I know. Is there any other key points you wanted to make in terms of summary before we close up for this time?
Oh no! Don't make it an open-ended question. I could go on. No, I think this is a good stopping point, Lisa. We've covered a lot of ground, and I hope we've given people some hope and also some things to really think about in terms of what they're doing with their business and not feel helpless, not feel like, gee, I'm just being buffeted by events. We're in better shape than that. So I really thank you for the opportunity to let me talk a little bit about policy and things that are really vitally important to me and to my clients.
Absolutely. I think it's it's a really interesting world, and we need more and more people who understand how global effects tie into regional effects and technologies. So really remember that you're only as strong as your weakest link in your supply chain, and there's no way that we're going to do it all on our own, and no one company, no one person. So, it is going to be key who we consider to be our strategic partners going forward. And like John said, there could be different needs for different partners and, different timeframes as well. So in essence, there's a lot of opportunities on the horizon for those companies and individuals that are willing to think about what's going to be needed in the future and are willing to make some prudent investments and are willing to, step outside the norm, because so the supply chain is not going back to the way it was. It's only moving forward from here. So, well, thank you very much, John, for talking about the global supply chain and the war in Iran and what all this means in our choke points. And I'm certain we'll have you back again in the future. Hopefully, no more. Hopefully, we can wrap this up and we can move on to pleasanter topics in terms of the global supply chain. That'd be good. But thank you very much.
And I should let everybody know that you can see Lisa talking about some of the same things in a different context on professionals of the Inland Empire. So her episode, this will be her second time as a guest on that podcast, which is on YouTube, will be up for next week. So look for that.
Excellent. Well, thank you, John. And we will see you again next time.
All right.